Mom, put that apron on and make sure the wine keeps flowing. I don't want my friends thinking you're a nuisance. The word nuisance cut through my soul like a rusty blade. Today, I'm going to tell you something I never thought I'd share. And if, for just a second, any of this sounds familiar to you, I only ask that you leave a like and subscribe. It will help me keep unburdening myself. My name is Carol. I'm 68 years old, and I live on the outskirts of Tampa, Florida, in a modest little house where the scent of orange blossoms drifts through the windows every spring. But this story doesn't happen there. This story happens at my beach house in Clearwater, the one I bought after selling the small condo I shared with my late husband, working until 11 at night, cleaning office buildings for 5 years just to afford it. It was a Friday in July when I got the call from my son, Michael. Mom, I'm bringing some friends to the beach house this weekend. Get everything ready the way you do, okay? He said, using that voice he reserves for when he needs something, sweet and persuasive as honey. My heart filled with joy. It had been months since Michael had visited, always with excuses about work, social commitments, a life that seemed too important to include his mother. I thought I'd finally have the chance to meet his friends, to show him how proud I was of the house I'd earned with so much sweat. I spent the entire week getting everything ready. I bought prime steaks and jumbo shrimp from the finest market in Tampa, the most expensive I could find. I scrubbed every corner of the house until the tiles on the patio gleamed like mirrors under the Florida sun. I changed the linens in all 4 bedrooms, put fresh flowers on every table, and even brought out the crystal wine glasses I'd been saving for a special occasion. On Saturday morning, I arrived at Clearwater early. The house smelled of lemon-scented cleaner and that salty air from the Gulf. I put on my navy blue dress, the one that made me feel elegant, and waited nervously on the patio, imagining how I'd show them the ocean view, how I'd tell them that every brick in that house represented a sleepless night, cleaning buildings when all of Tampa was asleep. At 2 in the afternoon, I heard the cars pull up, first one, then another, then a third. I counted the doors shutting, 1, 2, 3, up to 8. Michael had brought 22 people. 22 strangers to my house without telling me. I walked down the stairs with a trembling smile, ready to be introduced as the owner of the house, as Michael's mother. But what I heard when I reached the living room shattered my soul. Mom, put that apron on. You know how to serve better than anyone. Make sure the wine keeps flowing and the food is perfect. I don't want my friends thinking you're a nuisance. The word nuisance echoed in my ears like a voice in an empty cave. One of the guests, a man in a white linen shirt and a gold watch, laughed and said, "Hey, Mike, you hired some great help. She looks very professional." Michael smiled. He didn't defend me. He didn't say, "She's my mother." He didn't clarify that it was my house. He just smiled and added, "Yeah, she knows the routine. Carol, could you bring out those appetizers you made?" Carol, not even Mom in front of his friends, just Carol, as if I were the housekeeper they'd hired for the weekend. My hand shook as I took the apron Michael held out to me. It was an old one, stained with grease, that I used for cleaning. I tied it around my waist over my navy blue dress, and it felt like I was putting on a uniform of shame. For the next 6 hours, I ran from the kitchen to the living room, carrying platters that felt as heavy as stones. I served the slow-smoked brisket I had started at 7 in the morning, wiped lipstick stains from wine glasses, and collected dirty plates that piled up like mountains in my sink. The guests talked about their jobs at big corporations, their trips to Paris and Milan, their second homes in the Hamptons. I moved among them like a ghost, invisible except when they needed something. "Ma'am, can you bring more ice?" "Carol, we're out of wine. Is there more in the cellar? Could you clean this spot on the sofa?" I spilled my champagne. No one asked me how I was. No one offered me a glass of water. No one invited me to sit for a moment on my own patio to watch the sunset over the sea that I had dreamed of enjoying in my retirement years. At 10 o'clock, when they finally left to have dinner in town, I collapsed onto a kitchen chair. My feet were swollen inside my good shoes, which weren't meant for standing for 8 hours straight. My hands smelled of dish soap and had tiny cuts from broken plates I'd cleaned up without anyone noticing. I cried at the kitchen table, that pine wood table I'd bought at a flea market because it reminded me of my mother's. My tears fell onto breadcrumbs I hadn't yet wiped away, mixing with the remnants of the food I had prepared with so much love, and that had been devoured without a word of thanks. That night, as I washed the mountain of dishes and glasses they had left, I remembered when Michael was a little boy and scraped his knee playing baseball. I would carry him home, clean his wounds with Neosporin, and sing to him until he fell asleep. I remembered the nights I stayed up sewing his shepherd's costume for the school Christmas pageant when I didn't have money to buy one. I remembered working double shifts for 2 years to pay for his business degree at the University of Florida. And now, my son, my only son, the boy I dedicated my entire life to, had turned me into his servant in front of 22 strangers in the house I had bought with the pennies saved from cleaning offices when the rest of America slept. At dawn on Sunday, I walked barefoot onto the beach. The Gulf waves broke gently against the shore, but inside my chest, a storm was brewing that threatened to tear me apart. I sat on the damp sand, in my wrinkled nightgown, and with my eyes swollen from crying, and for the first time in my 68 years, I wondered if I had been a fool for loving so much and asking for so little in return. The sun rose slowly over the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, colors that at any other time would have seemed beautiful. But that morning, I could only think of one word, hammering in my head: nuisance. Was that what I had become to my own son? A nuisance in the house I had paid for, in the life I had made possible with my sacrifices? That afternoon, while the guests napped after stuffing themselves with my brisket and homemade potato salad, I sat on the small kitchen balcony with a cup of cold coffee in my hands. From there, I could see the sea, but I could also hear their mocking laughter coming from the main living room. "Hey, Mike, your housekeeper is an amazing cook. How much do you pay her?" asked a female voice I didn't recognize. "Not much," Michael replied with a chuckle. "She works for room and board. You know how these old women are, they need to feel useful. Feel useful. As if I were a house pet that needed to perform tricks to justify its existence." I stood up, trembling, and shut the balcony door. I couldn't listen anymore, but the words had already pierced my chest like broken glass, cutting me inside with every breath. I went to my room, the smallest in the house, the one I had chosen for myself because the others were for guests, and opened the nightstand drawer where I kept old photographs. My fingers, still wrinkled from washing so many dishes, touched each image as if they were sacred relics. Here was Michael at 6, on the day of his first communion at St. Lawrence Catholic Church in Tampa. I had worked for 3 months cleaning Mr. Henderson's bakery before sunrise just to afford his white suit. I remembered crying with emotion as I watched him walk to the altar. So handsome, so mine. Here was another photo. Michael at 16, graduating from high school. I had missed my cleaning shift that afternoon to be there, losing a day's pay I desperately needed. But it didn't matter. Nothing mattered more than seeing my son receive that diploma that would take him to college. And this one, Michael at 25, the day he graduated with his business degree. I was standing in the back of the photo in my best dress, the same navy blue one I wore today, smiling proudly as he posed with his classmates. That degree had cost me all my savings, plus 2 loans that I finished paying off when I turned 65. But there was one photo that hurt more than all the others. Michael at 30, the day he bought his first luxury condo in downtown Tampa, an expensive place with a view of the bay that cost more than I would earn in my entire lifetime. I had given him the $30,000 for the down payment, completely emptying the savings account I had started when he was born. "It's a loan, Mom," he had told me then. "I'll pay you back in a year, with interest." That was 8 years ago. He never paid back a single dollar, and when I mentioned it once, he said, "Mom, you know that money was just my inheritance in advance. In the end, everything you have will be mine anyway." His inheritance, as if I were already dead. I put the photos away and went down to the kitchen to prepare snacks. The guests had woken up and were asking for coffee, pastries, cut fruit. I obeyed in silence, carrying tray after tray, collecting dirty mugs, wiping up crumbs. One of the women, a bleached blonde with a designer handbag, stopped me as I passed. "Excuse me, ma'am. Carol, right? Could you iron this blouse for me for tonight? We're going out to dinner in town and I have nothing else to wear." I ironed her blouse, Then I ironed a shirt for another guest. Then another blouse for another woman. Then I cleaned the shoes of 3 men who had walked on the beach. My back was killing me. My hands were red from the iron's steam, but I kept doing it because I didn't know how to say no. Michael found me in the laundry room, folding his friend's clothes at 9 o'clock at night. "Mom, hurry up with that. I need you to whip up some dinner quickly before we go. And early tomorrow, you have to clean everything before Rachel gets here." Rachel? I didn't know who Rachel was. "Who's Rachel, son?" "My new girlfriend. She's coming to spend the day tomorrow. And please don't overwhelm her with questions like you did with Sarah." Sarah had been his previous girlfriend, a sweet girl who always greeted me warmly and helped me in the kitchen when she came over. One day, she just disappeared. When I asked Michael what happened, he said, "She was getting too involved in our family business, Mom. I didn't like how she treated you like a friend instead of respecting the hierarchy." Now I understood what he had meant. I made sandwiches for 22 people while they got ready to go out. I could hear them laughing upstairs, talking about the expensive restaurants they were going to, the clubs they'd hit afterward. No one asked if I wanted to join them. No one asked if I had eaten. No one asked me anything. They left at 11 in a convoy of expensive cars, leaving the house a mess and leaving me alone with mountains of dirty dishes and laundry. I sat on the sofa, my sofa, in my house, for the first time all day. My bare feet touched the Persian rug I'd bought at a flea market in St. Pete, the one I had haggled over for an hour because every dollar hurt to spend. I looked around. This living room, where I now felt like a stranger, had been my dream for years. The white linen curtains that moved with the sea breeze, the solid wood coffee table I'd found at a thrift store and refinished myself, the paintings of the Florida coastline I'd collected from art fairs. Everything bought with my money, everything chosen with my hands. Everything dreamed of during the lonely nights after my husband died, when I worked late cleaning offices and planned for the day I'd have a house by the sea where my son and I could be happy. But my son didn't see me as his mother. He saw me as his servant. And his friends didn't see me as the owner of the house. They saw me as the hired help they'd brought in to make their lives more comfortable. I stood up and went to the mirror in the entryway. The woman staring back at me had disheveled gray hair, her face etched with worry lines, her eyes red from crying in silence. Her hands were chapped from detergent, her back stooped from carrying heavy trays. When had I become this? When had I stopped being Carol, the woman who raised a son on her own after being widowed at 42? When had I stopped being Carol, the woman who worked 3 jobs so her son could go to college? When had I become this shadow who lived to serve and only existed when someone needed something? That night, lying in my single bed listening to the sound of the waves, I remembered a conversation I'd had with my mother before she died. I was 30 and Michael was just 5. "Carol," she had told me in her weak but firm voice, "always remember that a mother's love should teach her children to fly, not to cling to her like leeches. If you don't set boundaries, you'll raise a man who believes women exist to serve him." I had told her she was wrong, that Michael was different, that he loved me and would always respect me. But tonight, with the bitter taste of humiliation still in my mouth, I understood that my mother had been right, and that I had spent 28 years creating the monster that was now devouring my soul. Sunday dawned gray, with low clouds covering the sun, as if the sky, too, was tired of pretending everything was fine. I got up at 6, as always, and went barefoot to the kitchen to start cleaning up the mess from the night before. The ashtrays were overflowing with cigarette butts, stained wine glasses were scattered all over the patio, and the floor was sticky with spilled champagne. On the sofa, I found a woman's underwear that someone had forgotten, and in the master bathroom, there was vomit that no one had bothered to clean up. As I scrubbed the floor on my hands and knees, I heard laughter from upstairs. The guests were waking up and already shouting for breakfast. "Carol, is there coffee?" someone yelled from above. "And toast, with avocado," added another voice. "And freshly squeezed orange juice," a third one shouted. I got up with difficulty, my knees cracking like old wood. I was 68 years old and hadn't slept more than 3 hours. But there I was, rushing to make breakfast for 22 people who didn't even know my name properly. I climbed the stairs carrying a huge tray with mugs, plates, and napkins. My arms trembled from the weight, but I didn't dare make 2 trips because Michael had once told me that good help is efficient. When I reached the main living room, I found a scene that broke my heart. They were all sitting in a circle, passing around photos on their phones and roaring with laughter. I recognized the pictures immediately. They were of me, taken secretly while I was serving, cleaning, and picking up after them the day before. "Look at this one, Mike," said the blonde with the designer bag. "Your housekeeper carrying 5 plates at once. It's like a circus act." "And this one," added a man with a beard. "She's practically falling asleep on her feet while pouring the wine. This is priceless." Michael was laughing louder than anyone. My own son was laughing at pictures of me being humiliated, exhausted, treated like an object of entertainment. "What if we post them on Instagram?" suggested a young woman, with the hashtag #JarnEpicHousekeeper or something. "No," Michael said. "Better keep these for ourselves. They're too good." I just stood there, tray in hand, watching my dignity become their private joke. None of them met my eyes. To them, I wasn't a person with feelings. I was a comedy character, a funny anecdote to share at other parties. I set the tray down on the table with trembling hands and left the room without a word. No one noticed I was gone. I went down to the beach and sat on a rock, staring at the horizon as tears streamed down my face onto my wrinkled nightgown. The Gulf was choppy that day, with waves crashing angrily against the stones, as if the sea itself was furious at the injustice. I thought of my mother, my father, my late husband Joe. What would they think if they saw me now? Joe had died when Michael was 12, but before he passed, he made me promise to raise our son to be a good man, who respects women and appreciates sacrifice. I had failed. I had raised a son who saw me as his personal servant, who allowed his friends to humiliate me, who laughed at my pain as if it were a show. When I returned to the house, I found Michael in the kitchen, calmly eating breakfast while reading the news on his phone. "Mom, Rachel will be here in an hour. Make sure the master bedroom is perfect, and make that seafood gumbo you do so well. I want to impress her." I stared at him. For the first time in years, I didn't move immediately to obey. "Michael," I said, my voice shaking, "yesterday you treated me like your employee in front of your friends." He looked up from his phone, annoyed. "What are you talking about, Mom? You put a dirty apron on me. You made me serve 22 people. No one spoke to me as if I were your mother. And this morning I saw them all laughing at pictures of me." Michael sighed as if he were talking to a fussy child. "Mom, don't be so dramatic. You do these things better than anyone. It's only natural that you handle the food and service. That's what the house is for, isn't it?" "That's what the house is for," I repeated slowly. "My house is for me to be your servant?" "It's our house," he corrected me. "And since I'm the man of the family, it's normal for you to handle the domestic side of things, the man of the family." As if I were a child incapable of making decisions. As if my 68 years of life, my years as a widow, my work, my money, were all worthless. "I bought this house, Michael. With the money I earned cleaning offices." "Yeah, Mom. But you know that in the end, it'll all be mine anyway. We're family. What's yours is mine, and what's mine is, well, mine." Those words hit me like a bucket of ice water. What's yours is mine, and what's mine is mine. There it was. Our relationship summed up by my son. Just then, the doorbell rang. Rachel had arrived. She was a woman in her mid-30s, brunette, elegant, wearing a dress that cost more than my monthly Social Security check. Michael transformed completely when he saw her. Smiles, kisses, sweet words. He treated her like a queen. "Rachel, I'd like you to meet my mother, Carol. She's the one who keeps the house in perfect shape. She's the one who keeps the house." He didn't even say I owned it. Rachel greeted me with that polite smile important people use for the domestic staff. "A pleasure, Carol. Michael's told me so much about your amazing cooking. I can't wait to try that gumbo you make." For the next 4 hours, I served Michael and Rachel as if I were their personal employee. I brought them appetizers on the patio, mixed their drinks, changed their beach towels 3 times because they got sand on them. Rachel talked about her job as a marketing director, her trips to New York and London, her plans to buy an apartment in Chicago. Michael listened, captivated, hanging on her every word, treating her with a deference he had never shown me. "Carol," Rachel said at one point, "could you bring me a lemonade with no sugar? I'm on a diet." I went to the kitchen to make the lemonade, squeezing lemons by hand because I didn't own a juicer. As I stirred the drink, I overheard their conversation from the patio. "Your mother is very accommodating," Rachel was saying. "Yeah, she's always been like that," Michael replied. "From the time I was a kid, she got me used to being waited on. It's her way of showing love, I guess." "Have you ever thought about hiring a professional? A real housekeeper, I mean. So your mom can get some rest?" Michael laughed. "Why? She'd be bored if she had nothing to do. Besides, nobody cooks like her. She's like a perfect machine. A perfect machine. That's what my son thought of me. Not his mother. Not the woman who raised him. Not the person who had sacrificed her life for him. A machine that existed for his convenience." When I brought them the lemonade, my hands were shaking so much that I spilled a few drops on the glass table. Rachel frowned. "Carol, be more careful, please." Michael looked at me with embarrassment, as if my trembling hands were a flaw that shamed him in front of his girlfriend. "Mom, clean that up properly," he said in a stern tone. I wiped the drops with a napkin, leaning over the table while they continued their conversation as if I were invisible. And in that moment, seeing my distorted reflection in the wet glass, seeing my wrinkled hands cleaning up my own clumsy mess while my son scolded me in front of a stranger, something inside me broke. It wasn't my heart. That had been broken many times before. It was something deeper. It was the part of me that had believed if I just kept being the perfect mother, the perfect servant, the perfect machine, one day I would earn back my son's love and respect. That night, after Rachel left and Michael locked himself in his room to talk on the phone, I sat on the patio with a cup of cold tea in my hands. The sea was calm, but a storm raged in my chest. For the first time in my life, I thought of words I had never imagined directing at my son. "No, no, I will not continue to be your servant. No, I will not continue to be invisible in my own house. No, I will not continue to be the perfect machine that runs for your convenience." But I still didn't have the courage to say them out loud. On Monday morning, Michael came down for breakfast with that satisfied smile he wore when things went exactly his way. He sat at the kitchen table and started checking his messages while I, as always, made him coffee with milk, toast with olive oil, and freshly squeezed orange juice. "Mom, I need you to stay today and deep clean the whole house," he said, without looking up from his phone. "Rachel is coming next weekend, and I want everything to be spotless. You also need to wash all the bedding and iron the living room curtains." Ironing the curtains. Those heavy linen curtains I'd bought 2 years ago, that weighed so much my arms ached every time I had to take them down. "And one more thing," he continued, biting into his toast. "I need you to transfer $2,000 to my account. I want to take Rachel to that new Michelin-starred restaurant at the marina." $2,000. More than my entire monthly Social Security payment. "Michael," I said slowly, still standing by the sink, "I don't have $2,000. He looked up for the first time, his expression annoyed. "Mom, come on. You have Dad's pension plus your own. And I know you have savings put away." The savings. The $800 I had managed to scrape together, penny by penny, over the last 3 years, by always buying the cheapest brands at the grocery store, mending my old clothes instead of buying new ones, turning off the heat in winter to lower the electric bill. "That money is for emergencies, son." Michael laughed, that cold laugh I had grown to hate. "What kind of emergency are you going to have, Mom? You live in a paid-off house. I solve all your problems. That money sitting there is useless." I stayed silent, but something inside me began to burn. Those $800 represented my only security, my only safety net if something went wrong. It was the money that let me sleep at night knowing I had something of my own, something no one could take from me. "No," I said. The word escaped on its own, like a whisper, but it sounded so clear in the quiet kitchen that even I was surprised I'd said it. Michael stopped chewing. He looked at me as if he hadn't heard right. "What did you say?" "I said no," I repeated, and this time my voice was firmer. "I'm not giving you $2,000. My son's expression changed completely. The smile vanished and his eyes hardened like stones. What do you mean, no? He stood up from his chair. Mom, don't be difficult. It's just money. Besides, you know everything you have will be mine in the end anyway. Not everything I have will be yours, Michael. Those savings are mine. Yours? He walked toward me slowly. Mom, please don't be ridiculous. What do you need $800 for? To buy what? New clothes? Jewelry? You're 68 years old. You don't need anything anymore. You don't need anything anymore. As if at 68, a person ceases to be human, to have desires, dreams, needs. I need to have something of my own, I whispered. Everything you have is mine, Mom. That's the reality. I'm your only son, your only family. When you die, it all passes to me anyway. Why complicate things? When you die. He said it so naturally, as if he were talking about the weather. As if my death were merely a bureaucratic step that would grant him access to my possessions. And another thing, he continued, sitting back down as if nothing had happened. Since we're talking about money, I think it's time you put the house in my name. For legal reasons, to avoid problems with the IRS when I die. Again, that casual reference to my death, as if it were something he was eagerly awaiting. I'm not putting the house in your name, I said. This time, Michael froze completely. The piece of toast in his hand fell onto his plate. What did you just say? That I'm not putting the house in your name. It's my house. I bought it with my money. It's in my name. And that's how it's going to stay. Michael shot up so abruptly that his chair fell backward with a loud crack. What the hell is wrong with you, Mom? He yelled. Have you gone crazy? This is my house. I'm the one who enjoys it, who brings my friends here, who makes plans here. You enjoy it, yes. But I paid for it. I clean it. I maintain it. You're just doing what you're supposed to do. That's what being my mother is. Mothers sacrifice for their children. Sacrifice. Again. That word that had defined my life for 30 years. Michael, I said, my voice sounding different, deeper, more certain. Sacrificing for you doesn't mean being your servant forever. You're not my servant. You're my mother. And mothers take care of their children. Mothers take care of their little children, Michael. You're 38 years old. He was quiet for a moment, breathing hard through his nose like an enraged bull. You can't do this to me, he finally said, his voice lower but more threatening. You can't leave me without the house. You can't take away what's mine by right. By what right? By the right of being your son. By the right of having taken care of you all these years. I started to laugh, a bitter laugh that came from the depths of my soul. You've taken care of me? Michael, I worked until I was 65 cleaning offices to support myself. I paid for this house. I pay for the food, the electricity, the water, the gas. When have you ever taken care of me? I give you company. I come to see you. You'd be all alone without me. Michael, you only come when you need something, when you want me to cook for you, to do your laundry, to serve your friends. You don't come to see me. You come to use me. The words flew out of my mouth like bullets. Words I had been thinking for years but had never dared to say. And every single one of them was true. Michael looked at me with an expression I had never seen before. There was anger, yes, but also something else. Something that looked like genuine surprise. I can't believe what I'm hearing, he muttered. My own mother telling me I use her. Because it's the truth. The truth is that you live for me. That's your function. That's your reason for existing. Without me, without taking care of me, without serving me, you're nothing. Without him, I was nothing. There it was, the core of it all. Michael truly believed my only reason for being was to serve him. That without that function, I was an empty shell. Just then, my phone buzzed. It was a text from my neighbor Brenda, the only person left from my old life in Tampa who still kept in touch. Carol, how are you, sweetie? Haven't heard from you in weeks. The girls from the neighborhood were asking about you at the market yesterday. We'd love for you to come have coffee with us one of these days. We miss you. I read the message twice. We miss you. When was the last time someone had said that to me? When was the last time someone had asked about me without needing something in return? Michael snatched the phone from my hands. Who's this? He read the message. Oh, the old biddies from the neighborhood. Mom? I've told you I don't like you wasting time with those women. They have nothing to offer you. They offer me their friendship. Friendship? Mom, please. They're a bunch of envious gossips who only want to know about your life so they can criticize you later. That's not true? Of course it's true. Besides, you don't need friends. You have me. You have me. As if he were enough to fill my entire existence. As if one person, even a son, could satisfy all of another person's emotional needs. Michael, I said, taking my phone back. I need more than just you. More what? His voice sounded wounded. What more could you possibly need? I give you purpose. A reason to get up in the morning. Someone to take care of. What more does a mother want? A mother wants respect. A mother wants to be seen as a person. A mother wants her sacrifices to be appreciated instead of taken for granted. A mother wants to be loved, not used. But I didn't say that. I still didn't have the courage to say everything I was thinking. I'm going to Tampa to see my friends, I announced instead. No, you're not. He replied flatly. You have to stay and clean the house, and you have to go to the bank and transfer me the money. I'm not transferring you anything. And yes, I am going to Tampa. Michael grabbed my arm, hard. His fingers dug into my wrinkled skin like pincers. Mom, you're disappointing me. This isn't like you. You've always been obedient. You've always understood your place. What's gotten into you? My place. My place was to serve in silence, to obey without question, to exist solely for his convenience. What's gotten into me, I said, pulling my arm free, is that I'm tired of being invisible in my own life, and for the first time in 30 years, I walked out of the house without his permission. The commuter train to Tampa had never seemed so quiet. During the entire hour and 20-minute ride, I couldn't stop shaking. I had left without permission. I had said no. I had disobeyed. At 68, I felt like a teenager running away from home. My phone rang incessantly. Michael called every 5 minutes, sent furious texts, but I didn't answer. For the first time in decades, the sound of his voice didn't trigger an immediate urge to run and fix whatever he needed. When I arrived at the station, the familiar smell of Tampa hit me like an unexpected hug. Fried dough from the food trucks, oranges from the market, that mix of sea and city air I had breathed for 40 years before moving to the coast. I walked through the streets of my old neighborhood like a tourist rediscovering her own life. Things had changed a little, but the bones were the same. The bakery where I bought bread every morning when Michael was little. The pharmacy where they knew me by name. The park where I took him to play ball on Sundays. I got to the diner where I was meeting Brenda and the others. A small place, with worn Formica tables and waitresses who'd been there since the 80s. It wasn't fancy, but it was real. It was mine. Brenda saw me walk in and stood up with open arms. 65, with platinum blonde hair and wrinkles she didn't bother hiding because, as she said, each one tells a story. Carol, it's so good to see you. She hugged me tight, and she smelled of baby powder and light cigarettes. You're too thin, woman. Are you eating right? How long had it been since someone asked if I was eating right? Not because they needed me to cook for them, but because they genuinely cared about my well-being. I'm fine, Brenda, I lied, because I still didn't know how to talk about my pain. At the table were Linda, Sharon, and Donna, 4 women who had been my confidants for years, who had watched Michael grow up, who had sat with me at my husband's wake, who had celebrated every one of my son's small achievements with me. Carol, honey, you look younger every day, said Donna, who was 72 and had an energy I'd lost long ago. What's your secret? Secret. If only they knew my secret was being invisible in my own life, being a serving machine that ran 24 hours a day. No secret. I smiled weakly. Just the quiet life at the beach. And Michael? Asked Linda. We haven't seen him around here in ages. How's work? Michael. The conversation always came back to Michael. But this time, instead of the maternal pride I used to feel when they talked about him, I just felt a knot of pain in my stomach. He's doing well, I answered automatically. And a girlfriend? A handsome boy like him should be married by now. Giving you grandchildren, Sharon added. Grandchildren. The word conjured a horrible image. Michael raising his children to see me the way he did. As the servant grandmother, The one who cooks and cleans and disappears when she isn't needed. He has a new girlfriend. Her name's Rachel. That's wonderful. When are you bringing her by to meet us? The idea seemed absurd. Bringing Rachel to this humble diner with my lifelong friends who spoke their minds and laughed too loudly? Michael would be mortified. Rachel would think we were a bunch of tacky old women. I don't think she'd like this kind of place, I said without thinking. What kind of place? Brenda frowned. Carol, this has been our spot forever. We've laughed here, cried here, told our secrets here. What's wrong with it? Nothing. There was nothing wrong with it. It was me who had gotten used to seeing my life through Michael's eyes, to measuring everything by his standards of elegance and sophistication. No, I'm sorry, I didn't mean that. It's just, I trailed off, because I didn't know how to explain that my own son had taught me to be ashamed of my roots. We ordered coffee and muffins. Regular store-bought muffins, not the artisanal pastries Michael preferred. But they tasted like heaven because I was sharing them with people who loved me without asking for anything in return. Carol, are you okay? Donna asked suddenly. You seem, I don't know, sad. And that's when my voice broke. After so many years of pretending everything was perfect, that I was the luckiest mother in the world, that Michael was the ideal son, I fell apart at a Formica table in a diner that smelled of burnt coffee. No, I whispered. I'm not okay. The four women leaned in toward me with that instinctive solidarity that women of our generation have when one of us is hurting. What is it, honey? Brenda put her hand on my shoulder. And then I told them everything. I told them about the 22 guests who treated me like a servant. I told them about the dirty apron, the mocking photos, about Michael laughing at me as if I were a circus act. I told them about Rachel and how my son was ashamed to introduce me as the owner of the house. I told them about the $2,000, the threat of taking my house, and the phrase that had broken my soul. Without me, you're nothing. As I spoke, tears fell onto the table, mixing with spilled coffee. Years of silence came pouring out, like a river breaking a dam. When I finished, the silence was so thick you could cut it with a knife. It was Donna who spoke first. Carol, that's not your son. That's a monster. Donna, don't say that. I chided automatically. He's my son. No, honey, Linda intervened. Sons don't treat their mothers like that. Sons are grateful, they respect, they care. What you're describing isn't a son, it's a parasite. Parasite. The word sounded raw, harsh, but also accurate. You don't understand, I whispered. I raised him alone after Joe died. Maybe I did something wrong. Maybe I made a mistake somewhere. You made a mistake? Brenda's voice rose. Carol, you worked like a dog to give him everything he needed. You sacrificed. You wore yourself out. You gave him things you didn't even have. And now you're blaming yourself because he's an ungrateful brat. But mothers are supposed to raise children, not slaves, Sharon interrupted me. And sons are supposed to become men, not tyrants. Tyrant. Another word that hurt because it was true. But I'm his mother, I insisted. It's my obligation. Your obligation was to raise him right. And from what you're telling me, you did your part. He's the one who failed to do his. Donna ordered another round of coffee for all of us. Carol, do you remember when we were young and we'd talk about our dreams? She asked me. I remembered. I wanted to travel, to see other cities, maybe own a small clothing boutique. Simple dreams, but they were mine. And what happened to those dreams? I gave them all to Michael. And what did he do with them? I fell silent because the answer shamed me. Michael had taken all my dreams and turned them into his education, his degree, his condo, his comfort. And then he told me that without serving him, I was nothing. Carol, Brenda said, her voice soft but firm, you're 68 years old. If you live to be 85, God willing, you have 17 years left. Are you going to spend them being your own son's servant? 17 years. It sounded like a long time when she put it like that, but it also sounded like very little time to keep wasting my life. I don't know how to change things, I admitted. Yes, you do, Donna replied. You already started today. You came here without his permission. You said no. You stood up for yourself. It was true. For the first time in 30 years, I had disobeyed, and the world hadn't ended. You know what? Linda said suddenly. I think you should stay in Tampa for a few days. With us. Rest, think, remember who you are when you're not serving someone else. The idea filled me with as much fear as it did hope. Stay in Tampa? Without cooking for Michael? Without cleaning his messes? Without being on call for his needs? I can't. Michael needs me. What Michael needs is to learn how to live without a servant, Donna declared. My phone rang again. It was Michael, for the 20th time. This time I answered. Where the hell are you? He yelled before I could speak. I've been calling for hours. You were supposed to clean the house and you haven't done a thing. The bed is unmade. The breakfast dishes are still in the sink. Michael, I'm in Tampa with my friends. What friends? I told you not to go. Come back right now. The 4 women looked at me. Brenda shook her head, as if to say, Don't give in. No. I told him. I'm not coming back right now. What do you mean, no? Mom, stop with these tantrums. You have responsibilities. Michael, you're 38 years old. You can make your own bed and wash your own dishes. I shouldn't have to do those things. That's what you're for. No, Michael, I'm not for that anymore. And I hung up. For the first time in my life, I hung up on my son. And the world kept spinning. That night, I slept on Brenda's sofa. Her apartment was small, 2 bedrooms, with furniture she'd bought 20 years ago and kept impeccably with love and care. It smelled of fabric softener and the flowers she grew on her balcony. For the first time in months, I slept for 8 straight hours. There was no one yelling at me to make coffee. There was no one waiting for me to make their bed. There was no one treating me like an employee in my own life. At dawn, Brenda woke me with a cup of coffee and some cookies. How did you sleep, honey? Better than I have in years, I confessed, and it was the truth. My phone had 43 missed calls from Michael and 18 WhatsApp messages. The first few were furious. Get back here now. You're crazy. You can't do this to me. The middle ones were manipulative. Mom, you have me worried. Why are you punishing me like this? You know I need you. The last ones were threatening. If you're not back today, we're going to have a serious talk. This will have consequences. You're acting like a spoiled child. Are you going to answer him? Brenda asked. I don't know what to say. Tell him the truth, that you're not his servant. But when I dialed his number, my hands were trembling. 30 years of obedience aren't erased overnight. Finally! Michael yelled before I could speak. Mom, this is the last straw. I've been eating sandwiches for 2 days because you can't do anything but disappear when I need you most. Michael, I didn't disappear. I told you I was coming to Tampa. Without my permission, without notice. Do you think it's normal for a mother to abandon her son like that? Abandon. As if having a life of my own was abandonment. Michael, you're 38 years old. You don't need my permission for anything, and I don't need yours. Oh, really? And who's going to take care of the house? Who's going to do the grocery shopping? Who's going to have everything ready for when Rachel comes on Friday? You are. Me? Mom, please be reasonable. I work. I have important responsibilities. I can't waste time on household chores. Household chores. As if taking care of his own life was a waste of time, but taking care of it for him was my natural obligation. Michael, those are your responsibilities, not mine. You're my mother. Taking care of me is your job. My job was to raise you. And I've already done that. He was quiet for a few seconds. When he spoke again, his voice was dangerous. Mom, I think you're having some kind of breakdown. Maybe you should see a doctor. Women your age sometimes have mental issues. Mental issues. Michael was suggesting I was crazy for wanting to be treated with dignity. I'm not crazy, Michael. I'm tired. Well, rest all you need, but come back. I have an important dinner at the house tomorrow, and I need you to make that roast lamb you do so well. No. What do you mean, no? I mean I'm not coming back to cook for your dinner parties. Hire a caterer. Michael exploded. A caterer? Do you know how much a caterer costs? I'm not going to waste money on that when I have a mother who's a fantastic cook. Then cancel the dinner. I can't cancel. These are important clients. My career depends on this stuff. Mom, please don't be so selfish. Selfish. For not wanting to be his free chef, I was selfish. Michael, find a solution that isn't me. You are the solution. That's your function. That's what you're for. I hung up again, this time without trembling. Brenda, who had heard the whole conversation, shook her head. Carol, that boy is a lost cause. He needs someone to teach him what real life is. I just don't know how to do this, Brenda. I feel guilty. What if he really does need me? Honey, there's a difference between needing you and using you. Michael uses you. I spent 3 days in Tampa. 3 days where I remembered who Carol was when she wasn't defined as Michael's mother. We went to the farmer's market, bought flowers for Brenda's apartment, sat on park benches and watched people go by. Simple things that filled my soul. On Thursday night, I decided to go back to Clearwater, not because Michael had convinced me, but because it was my house and I had a right to be there. When I arrived, the house was a disaster. Dirty dishes piled in the sink, clothes strewn across the floor, empty beer bottles on the living room table. Michael had been living like an unsupervised teenager. I found him on the patio talking on the phone with Rachel. "No, babe, I don't know what's wrong with my mom," he was saying. "She's having some kind of 60-something crisis. You know how older women get. 60-something crisis. As if wanting dignity was a pathology linked to age. Yeah, of course, everything will be perfect for tomorrow. My mom's back now. She's over her tantrum. Tantrum. My awakening to my own dignity was a tantrum. When he finished the call, he walked over to me with that fake smile he used when he needed something. "Hey, Mom. Good to have you back. Are you over your bad mood?" "Michael, we need to talk." "Perfect, because I want to talk to you too. Rachel's coming for dinner tomorrow, and I need you to make that menu she liked so much last time. The whole house needs to be cleaned, the sheets in the master bedroom changed, and fresh flowers on the table." I stared at him, incredulous. After 3 days of a telephone war, after telling him clearly that I would no longer serve him, he was still giving me orders as if nothing had happened. "I'm not doing any of that." His smile vanished. "Mom, that's enough of these games. I'm sick of this attitude. I know you're upset about something, but it's over now. Let's get back to normal. Normal was me being your servant. That normal is over." Michael walked toward me slowly, like a predator cornering its prey. "Mom, you're going to do what I tell you. Period. This house is as much mine as it is yours. And as long as I live here, you will fulfill your obligations." "What obligations?" "Cooking, cleaning, taking care of me. Those are a mother's obligations." "Michael, those aren't a mother's obligations. Those are a housekeeper's obligations." He laughed that cruel laugh I had grown to hate so much. "And what's the difference?" The question hit me like a slap. To him, there was no difference between me being his mother and being his employee. We were both women who existed to serve him. The difference is that an employee gets paid for her work and has days off. A mother deserves love and respect. "You have my love." "No, Michael. You have my habit." The phrase came out of my mouth before I'd even thought it, but it rang so true it surprised me. Michael didn't love me. He was accustomed to me, like one is accustomed to a refrigerator that always works, or a faucet that always has water. "You're crazy," he muttered. "No, I'm awake." Just then the doorbell rang. Michael went to answer, and from the patio, I heard familiar voices. It was some of the guests from the previous weekend, the ones who had laughed at my pictures while I served them like a slave. "Mike!" a man's voice yelled. "We came by to grab a few beers before we head out to dinner." My son greeted them enthusiastically, as if they were exactly what he needed at that moment. "Perfect. Mom, bring beers for everyone, and those stuffed olives they all like." I stared at him. After everything we had talked about, after declaring war on my invisibility, he was still asking me to serve his friends as if I were the housemaid. "No." "Excuse me?" I said no. If they want beers, they can go to the kitchen and get them themselves. The guests, who had wandered into the living room, froze. One of them, the one who had called me the epic housekeeper, looked at me with a confused expression. "She's not going to serve us?" "No," I replied, my voice clear. "I am not going to serve you." Michael grabbed my arm and dragged me toward the kitchen, whispering furiously, "What the hell are you doing? You're embarrassing me in front of my friends." "No, Michael. You're the one embarrassing me." "Mom, go to your room and stay there until they leave. I don't want you making any more of a scene. This is my house, Michael. I'm not going to hide in my room. It's our house. No, it is my house. And I am sick of you bringing people here to make fun of me. I walked back into the living room where the 5 guests were waiting awkwardly. I looked at them one by one, remembering how they had laughed at my photos, how they had treated me like a funny servant. "Gentlemen," I said in a firm voice, "this is my house. I bought it with my money, with years spent cleaning offices. I am the owner, not the help, and you are not welcome here." The silence that followed was deafening. Michael's face was white with rage. "Mom, apologize right now. I will not apologize for defending myself." "You're crazy. Completely crazy. You're yelling at my friends." "I'm telling your friends the truth." One of the men stood up, looking uncomfortable. "Mike, maybe we should go. It seems like there's some family tension." "Don't go," Michael pleaded. "My mother is just going through a difficult time, but she'll get over it." "Michael," I said, "I'm not going to get over it. This is forever." That night, after the guests had left and Michael had stormed off to his room, slamming the door, I sat alone on the patio and looked out at the sea. For the first time in 30 years, I had defended my dignity in front of strangers. I had said out loud that I was the owner of my own house. I had rejected the role of servant that had been forced upon me. And even if Michael hated me, even if he screamed at me, even if he threatened me, for the first time in decades, I felt like a whole person. Tomorrow would be another day of war. But this was a war I was going to win. On Friday morning, Michael came down for breakfast as if nothing had happened. He sat in his usual spot and waited. He just waited, with the arrogant confidence of someone who believes the world revolves around them. I was making myself a coffee when I heard his voice. "Mom, there's no toast." It wasn't a question. It wasn't a request. It was a statement of a problem that, in his mind, I was meant to solve immediately. "Then go to the store and buy some," I replied without turning around. "Me? I don't have time. Rachel is coming this afternoon and I have to work late to finish some reports." I turned to face him. He was scrolling through his phone, completely oblivious to my presence, as if I were part of the furniture. "Michael, did you hear me last night?" "Yeah, Mom, I heard you. You had your little dramatic moment in front of my friends. Very nice. But the show's over. Rachel is coming today and I need everything to be perfect." A show. My dignity was a show to him. "I'm not cooking for Rachel." "Yes, you are. And you're also going to clean the house and put fresh flowers on the table. Because that woman could become my wife, and I need to make a good impression. Then you cook." Michael looked up from his phone for the first time, with that annoyed expression he got whenever someone contradicted him. "Mom, enough with the tantrums. You know perfectly well I don't cook. That's what you're for." "I am not for that. I am a person with my own life," he laughed. A dismissive, cruel laugh. "Your own life? Mom, please. What life could you possibly have? You're 68 years old. You live in a house that's going to be mine eventually. You don't have a job. You don't have a husband. You don't have other children. Your life is me." Those words pierced me like broken glass. Your life is me. As if I were a satellite orbiting his sun, with no independent existence, no purpose beyond serving him. "Michael, I have friends. I have interests." "What interests? Sitting around with those old biddies from the neighborhood to gossip? Is that what you call a life? Old biddies from the neighborhood." That's how he referred to the women who had stood by me in my darkest moments, who had shown me more affection in 3 days than he had in years. They are my friends. They're a bunch of frustrated old women with nothing better to do than fill your head with weird ideas. That's why I don't like you hanging out with them. Weird ideas. Like the idea that I deserved respect. Like the idea that I wasn't his personal property. "Michael, I'm going to be very clear with you. I am not cooking for Rachel. I am not cleaning the house. I am not buying flowers. If you want to impress her, you do it." He shot up from his chair, knocking over his coffee mug, which shattered on the floor in 1,000 pieces. The sound echoed in the kitchen like a gunshot. "That's it," he screamed. "I am sick of your tantrums. Mom, you will do what I tell you because this house, even if it's in your name, is mine by right." "By what right?" "By the right of being your son. By the right of being the man of this family. By the right of being the one who's going to inherit it when you die." Again, that casual reference to my death, as if it were something he was eagerly awaiting. Michael, as long as I am alive, this house is mine. No, it's mine. It has always been mine. You were just the one who put up the money, but I'm the one who enjoys it, who brings friends over, who makes plans here. With my money, in my house. Your money, your house, he mimicked in a high, mocking voice. Mom, please, stop making a fool of yourself. That money you worked so hard for cleaning offices was pocket change. I make more in a month than you made in a year. It was true. His salary was much higher than mine had ever been, but every dollar I had earned scrubbing other people's floors until 11 at night had been filled with dignity, with honest effort, with sacrifice born of love. You may earn more, but I bought this house with my work, and I give this house value. Without me, this would just be some retiree's cottage in a dead-end town. I make it a place where important people hang out. Important people. As if a home's value was measured by the social status of its visitors, not by the love with which it was built. Michael, I think you should leave. He froze, as if he hadn't understood. What did you say? I said leave. Find somewhere else to live. Are you kicking me out of my own house? I am kicking you out of my house. Michael walked toward me with slow, menacing steps. For the first time in my life, I was afraid of my own son. Mom, you don't kick me out of anywhere. You have no authority over me. I have the authority of the owner of this house. You don't own anything. You're an old woman who's going to die soon, and in the meantime, you're just in my way. In my way. That word that had shattered my soul the first day. Michael, leave. Leave right now. I'm not leaving. This house is mine, whether you like it or not. And if you don't want to cook for Rachel, fine. I'll call a caterer, and I'll send you the bill. After all, you have those $800 you're so protective of. My savings. Again, my only financial security turned into his plunder. You are not touching my money. I'll touch whatever I want. Because you, dear mother, have no choice but to put up with me. Just then, his phone rang. It was Rachel. Hey, babe. His tone changed completely, becoming sweet and loving. Yeah, everything's perfect for tonight. My mom is making that delicious menu you loved so much. He stared at me as he spoke, challenging me. Yeah, of course she's excited to see you. You know how she is. She adores you. Lies. All lies, told with a terrifying ease. See you at 8. I love you. He hung up and smiled at me maliciously. See? It's all decided. Rachel's coming for dinner, you're going to cook, and we're going to pretend none of this ever happened. Because in the end, Mom, you know you have no way out. That afternoon, while Michael showered to get ready for his girlfriend, I did something I had never done in my life. I went into his room. It wasn't the first time I'd set foot in there, obviously. I was the one who had cleaned it, tidied it, changed the sheets 1,000 times. But I had never entered as an intruder, looking for something specific. I found what I was looking for on his nightstand, inside a drawer he thought I would never open. A voice memo on his phone, which he'd left plugged into the charger. I recognized my own voice immediately. It was from 6 months ago, when I'd been sick with a terrible stomach flu and he had come to take care of me. Michael, honey, thank you so much for coming. You know that. If anything happens to me, everything I have is for you. The house, my savings, everything. I just want you to know that you've always been the most important thing in my life. And then, Michael's voice, which I didn't remember. Mom, you're not going to die now, but when the time comes, yes, it will all be mine. That's only natural. In the meantime, you just have to keep taking care of me like you always have. It's just that sometimes I feel like I'm a burden to you. You're not a burden, Mom. You're useful. As long as you're useful, everything will be fine. As long as you're useful. That was the condition for his love. I wasn't his mother. I was his employee on a lifetime contract, to be renewed daily based on my utility. There were more recordings, conversations I'd had with him over the years, when I was vulnerable, sick, or just feeling nostalgic. Michael had recorded them without my knowledge, documenting every moment I reaffirmed my unconditional love for him, every promise to leave him everything, every declaration that he was my entire world, and in every single one, he responded with the same calculated coldness. Never, I love you, Mom. Never, I appreciate everything you've done for me. Always. That's good. That's only natural. As long as you're useful. My son had been documenting my vulnerability for years, collecting evidence of my emotional dependency, my promises, my desperate love, like a lawyer preparing his case for court. When I heard the key in the front door, I knew Rachel had arrived. I walked down the stairs with the phone in my hand, the weight of the truth crushing my chest. I found them in the living room. Rachel wore an elegant dress and a radiant smile. Michael was kissing her with a passion he had never shown me, not even as a child. "Carol," Rachel exclaimed. "I was so looking forward to seeing you. Michael told me you've prepared something delicious for dinner." I looked at both of them, at her, who was not to blame for any of this, but who represented the future Michael wanted to build on my ashes. At him, who was smiling at me with the arrogant confidence of someone who thinks they hold all the winning cards. "I haven't prepared anything," I told them in a calm voice. Rachel's smile faded. "You haven't? But Michael told me." "Michael lies a lot," I interrupted. "In fact, there's something you should hear." I took out his phone and played one of the recordings. My voice sounded weak and pathetic. "Michael, honey, you know that you've always been the most important thing in my life," and then his, cold and calculating. "As long as you're useful, everything will be fine." Rachel looked between us, confused. "What is this?" "This," I told her, "is the truth about the man you've fallen in love with." Michael turned pale. "Mom, what are you doing?" What I should have done years ago. Showing the truth. I played another recording. And another. And another. 5 years of conversations where I came across as a woman desperate for love, and he as an emotional predator who fed on my neediness. When the last one finished, Rachel was looking at me with horror. Not horror at Michael. Horror at me. "Carol," she said in a soft voice, "I think you're a very intense mother." And that's when I understood I had lost the game before it even began. That night, after an uncomfortable Rachel had left and Michael had locked himself in his room screaming that I had ruined his relationship, I sat on the patio with a half-packed suitcase at my feet. For 68 years, I had lived for others. For my late husband, who had been a good man but who expected me to be the perfect wife. For Michael, who had turned my motherly love into a chain that bound me to his service. For a society that had taught me a woman's value was measured by her capacity for sacrifice. But that night, looking at the sea under the full moon, I understood something that would change the rest of my life. I didn't need anyone else to understand my pain to validate it. I didn't need Rachel to side with me. I didn't need Michael to apologize. I didn't need the world to acknowledge my sacrifice. I only needed to acknowledge it myself. At 6 a.m, while Michael was still asleep, I loaded my car with the few things I had decided to take. 2 suitcases of clothes, the photos of my parents and my husband, the books I'd read over the years but never had time to truly enjoy, and a small box with my mother's jewelry. I left a note on the kitchen table. "Michael, I'm leaving. Not because I'm crazy, not because I'm having a crisis, not because the old biddies from the neighborhood filled my head with weird ideas. I'm leaving because I finally understand that I deserve better than to be useful. The house is yours. It's what you always wanted, so enjoy it. But know that I'm not giving it to you out of love. I'm giving it to you out of pity. Pity for a 38-year-old man who never learned how to live without his mother solving all his problems. My savings are coming with me. They are mine. I earned them with my work, and I'm going to use them to build the life I never dared to dream of. Don't look for me. Don't call me. Don't show up in Tampa asking for me. If one day you learn what it means to love without possessing, maybe we can talk. Until then, we have nothing to say to each other. Your mother, who left so she could continue to be one with dignity." I drove toward Tampa with the windows down, feeling the morning air on my face as if I were truly breathing for the first time. On the radio, Gloria Gaynor was singing "I Will Survive," and I sang along, off-key and free. The first few days were hard. I stayed at Brenda's while I looked for a small apartment I could afford with my savings and my Social Security. I cried a lot. I doubted myself more. And I wondered 1,000 times if I was making the biggest mistake of my life. But after a week, something incredible started to happen. I started to discover who Carol was when she wasn't defined by being Michael's mother. It turns out I liked sleeping in on Sundays. It turns out I thoroughly enjoyed reading romance novels while drinking a latte at 11 in the morning. It turns out I had my own opinions on politics, on movies, on life, opinions I had buried for decades because no one had ever asked for them. I found a perfect apartment in the Seminole Heights neighborhood, a second-floor unit with a balcony overlooking a tree-lined street, with a small but bright kitchen and a living room that fit my things exactly, with no empty spaces to remind me of what was missing. Michael called me exactly once, 2 weeks after I left. "Mom, this is ridiculous. Come home. The house is a mess and I don't know how the washing machine works." "Michael, you're 38 years old. Figure it out." "Figure it out? Are you crazy? I don't have time to learn household chores. I have a job, responsibilities, and I have a new life. Enjoy yours." I hung up and turned off my phone. He didn't call again. 3 months after I moved, Brenda convinced me to sign up for a painting class at the local community arts center. "Carol," she said, "you need to do something just for you, something that has nothing to do with taking care of anyone else." I was embarrassed at first, surrounded by ladies who talked about exhibitions and techniques while I didn't even know how to hold a brush properly. But the teacher, a woman named Eleanor in her 50s, told me something that changed my perspective. "Carol, art isn't about being perfect. It's about expressing what's inside you. And you have decades of stored-up emotions inside. Let them out." My first painting was awful. A gray and brown smudge that was supposed to be the sea at Clearwater, but looked more like mud. But when I finished it, I cried in front of all my classmates. Because for the first time in my life, I had created something that was mine, that didn't serve to feed anyone, that didn't solve anyone else's problem, that existed only because I had wanted it to exist. The second painting was better. The third, better still. After 6 months, Eleanor suggested I submit a piece for a collective student exhibition. Me? But I barely know how to paint. "Carol, you've been painting for 6 months with an intensity I've rarely seen. Your paintings aren't technically perfect, but they have soul. And you can't teach soul. You either have it or you don't." The night of the exhibition opening, I wore my navy blue dress, the same one from that terrible day in Clearwater. But this time, I felt completely different in it. It was no longer the uniform of an invisible woman. It was the dress of an amateur artist who had found the courage to show her work to the world. I had 3 paintings on display: woman cleaning, woman serving, and woman free. The first 2 showed hunched, gray, blurry figures. The third was an upright, colorful, sharp figure, with her arms open to an infinite horizon. A man approached me during the opening. He was older than me, maybe 75, with white hair and kind eyes. "Excuse me, are you Carol?" he asked. "Yes, I am." "My name is Arthur. Your paintings moved me very deeply. Do you mind if I ask what inspired them?" I told him my story. Not all of it, but enough for him to understand the journey those 3 pieces represented. He listened without interrupting, nodding occasionally, and when I finished, he said, "Carol, do you know the difference between a woman who sacrifices and a woman who is destroyed?" "No. The first one chooses when to stop." Arthur turned out to be a widower, a father of 2 married daughters who lived in Chicago, a retired teacher, and an amateur painter for 20 years. He also turned out to be the first man in my life who asked about my interests without expecting them to be related to taking care of others. I didn't fall in love with him immediately. After so many years defined by my relationships with men, first as a daughter, then as a wife, then as a mother, I needed time to discover who I was on my own. But we became friends, real friends, who met for coffee and talked about books, paintings, politics, and life. A year after leaving Clearwater, I got an unexpected call. It was Rachel. "Hi, Carol. It's Rachel, Michael's ex-girlfriend." "Hello, Rachel. How are you?" "Well, that's why I was calling. Michael and I broke up a few months ago, and I needed to talk to you." We met at a coffee shop in downtown Tampa. Rachel looked very different from how I remembered her. Less put together, less confident, with dark circles under her eyes that spoke of sleepless nights. "Carol, I have to apologize to you," she said without preamble. "The day we heard those recordings, I thought you were a possessive, intense mother who couldn't let her son go. But after living with Michael for 6 months, I understood everything you went through. What happened? He turned me into you. He expected me to cook for him, clean for him, organize his social life, be perfect in front of his friends but invisible when he didn't need me. And when I started to get tired, to ask for respect, he told me the exact same things he told you, that I was difficult, that I had issues, that I should be grateful to have him. Rachel cried as she told me how Michael had tried to isolate her from her friends, how he criticized her work, how he made her feel guilty for wanting time to herself. The difference is, I was able to leave after 6 months. You put up with it for 30 years. 30 years, I repeated. 30 years creating a monster. No, Carol. 30 years being devoured by one. That conversation closed a circle I didn't even know was open. Michael wasn't just a spoiled son. He was a man who had learned to relate to women as objects for his convenience. And I had been his first victim, but also his first teacher. 2 years after I left him the house, I found out by chance that Michael had sold it. A friend of Brenda's had seen it listed with a real estate agency for less than what I had paid. Apparently, with no one to keep it clean and maintained, it had deteriorated quickly. I didn't feel sadness. I felt a strange satisfaction, like when a plant you've overwatered finally dies and you can start fresh. Today, I'm 71 years old. I live alone in my Seminole Heights apartment. I paint 3 times a week. I've sold 4 paintings in 2 years. Not for the money, but for the pride of knowing someone wanted to hang something I created in their home. And I have a routine that revolves around me for the first time in my life. I get up when I want. I eat what I feel like for breakfast. I read books I enjoy, not the ones someone else deems important. I watch romance movies without anyone telling me they're silly women's stuff. I talk on the phone with my friends without anyone timing how much time I waste on useless conversations. Arthur and I are still friends. Some days I suspect we could be something more, but I'm in no hurry. For the first time in my life, I have all the time in the world to figure out what I want, instead of adapting to what others need. Michael? I haven't heard from him again. Sometimes I wonder if he's learned anything, if he's reflected on the 30 years of free labor he received from me, if he's understood the difference between being loved and being useful. But whenever I start to worry about him, I remind myself that that's not my job anymore. My job now is to live the life I have left with the dignity it took me 68 years to find. Because it turns out a woman isn't doomed to be invisible forever. She just needs to find the courage to turn on her own light. Have you ever experienced something like this? Do you know someone who has? Tell me about it in the comments. And if this story touched your heart, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel. Because maybe there's someone else out there who needs to hear that it's never too late to choose yourself.